This is a vintage Rouge 50 note changing cylinder music box. Let's listen to this play.
Well, you're listening to Happy Holiday from the new album by the Transpersonals. Joining me in the studio, Tim Hurford, Luke Barter, Matty Bane. Hi, fellas.
Hello.
Hi, Tony.
Nice to have you here.
It's lovely to be here.
And it's a lovely bit of music. I think we'll just leave that chugging along.
Okay. Your friendly sound man just described it as the Beach Boys on horse tranquilizers, which I love.
Wish we'd thought of that.
And before people have said that we sound like the Beatles on acid, in which I always point out the Beatles were on acid, you know. But maybe they meant that it's like listening to them.
Aren't there people in Liverpool who say, "Oh well, dear, once they started taking drugs, we liked them before then."
What do you mean? Once they started?
I didn't take them long to get going.
They just went from rum to amphetamines to weed to acid.
So is music all about drugs? Is music all about drugs?
Well, music is a drug, if you think about it, because it's made of molecules, air molecules. You make a sound. The air molecules vibrate in the air. You take the drug through your ears. The air molecules hit your eardrums. Your brain turns that into music. You get an internal mood. It's a mood-altering and mind-altering substance made of air, man.
I mean, the music sounds a little bit kind of 60s, and you're sounding a bit 60s as well now.
Well, yeah.
So is that
I'll soon be in my 60s before we get anywhere.
is that a deliberate influence, Tim?
It's not deliberate on my part, because obviously I wasn't around in the 60s, but it's what you mean the way that
you mean picking up on the 60s style music, maybe late 60s,
the 60s style music, and also the 60s style of thinking. You know, that whole kind of liberation revolution that was taking place in the 60s that caught the world on fire.
But did it? Because, I mean, yes, they had a lot of... I mean, I'm thinking about sort of West Coast US, where it was very big. A lot of this sort of so-called revolutionary music was being made. And in fact, wasn't there a band called Jefferson Airplane? I'm not sure if you know them, or some of the people I followed. They had an album which was all about that kind of thing. I'm trying to think the name of it. Gosh.
Oh, Matt?
Surrealistic Pillow.
No, it wasn't that one. No. Oh, gosh, the name of it. I will come back with you with that in a minute.
Okay.
But City on Rock and Roll.
Blows Against the Empire.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Yeah,
right,
so they had that whole attitude of, look, there's this kind of edifice of military banking thing that's running the Vietnam War as it was at the time. And they were, striking blows against the empire. So I wonder, do you think that they ever achieved anything with that? Because you look back on the 60s and it was a lot of dreaming, but not a lot of actual change.
Yeah, well, I think, like, at the time, people get into the music when they're kids, and it's when they grow up, isn't it, that you start getting the changes.
Well, I got into that simply because I grew up at a time when my parents had records on vinyl from the 60s left over from when they still listened to music. So as a kid growing up and as an only child, I spent a lot of time isolating by myself, listening to the Beatles, and also a lot of 50s music, where it's like the raw energy that stoked the 60s came from, a lot of rock and roll and Chuck Berry and that kind of thing. But the 60s is an obvious place to start looking for where a lot of influences come from with bands around today and music today, because it was just such an explosion of styles coming together at once, and you didn't have such a controlled, I don't think, machine around artists. It really was about the music and not the person. Do you know what I mean?
I do. I think we're in a situation now where the whole of cultural industries, including things like book printing, newspapers, magazines, is very much... I mean, if I go into a supermarket or Smith's and look along the shelf of all the different magazines, they all kind of look the same, formulaic.
Yeah.
There's nothing really to stand out about them, and they're all pandering to the highest person with the most money in their pocket. The idea is they're trying to appeal to them more as a conduit for the advertising that's going in there, rather than for its own.
One of the negative things I think happened, going back to Elvis and things like that, that the Beatles obviously kind of modelled their career on Elvis in a way that they wanted to go from as famous as they could. They wanted to end up in films, so people mistake now, I think, being a successful musician with, or they take their benchmark of how successful a musician is by how much of a celebrity they are, right? Or how much money they've made. They're mistaking musicians for celebrities. And what we are, going back to the music is a drug thing. To me, it really is alchemy. I'm interested. I see myself as a chemist, as a renegade chemist, like somebody who was making acid in the 60s. Yeah, somebody who was making who might make chemicals that affect people's consciousness. Well, I'm making the same chemicals but out of sound, and that's my interest. I'm not really particularly interested anymore. I was once.
Okay, well, before we get off the 60s and that kind of different style of cultural industry that there was around then, what are your influences? Maybe you first, Matty. What maybe not the 60s necessarily, but what were your influences musically? And
I liked reggae music.
psychedelic music, not necessarily just 60s psychedelic music.
Any bands that you might recommend? Because I see you're filming
Give us
a lot
your
of them. I
rating.
don't know who the psychedelic bands
Well,
are.
anything, if it's got Lee Perry's name on it, buy it, basically, production or performance or whatever. I like a lot of kind of modern not really psychedelic.
You like that
music.
sort of folk tinged.
Yeah, I mean, where'd you start? I like so
Pentangle.
many different things.
Give us some names of
Give
those.
us some names, yeah.
You're like,
Pentangle. I'll
Yeah.
throw
Oh,
some
yeah,
names
yeah,
at you.
yeah.
Right.
Throw some
I know
names.
that.
Come on, name them
That
up.
was- see, they had a few hits, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, they did.
Back in the
The
60s
Moody
and
Blues
70s.
as well.
The
you
Moody
like,
Blues
don't
I
you?
like. I mean, they're not particularly... well, they are well known, but they're not... they've made some great records.
They're pretty out there,
but
aren't they?
that's another 60s group. Or sort of 70s.
Amazing. They were doing something incredible. I mean, the Moody Blues, for example, were just doing something completely new, completely different. And it wasn't as if the record companies were saying, oh dear, this is new, it's different, it's never going to sell, and we're going to have something which was the same as last week, or the week before, or the year before. What about you, Luke? What about your influences?
At the moment, I'm listening. Like this album's got sort of like 50s pop sort of vibe to it, like like Mr. Sandman.
Oh, yeah.
That song, and it's also like Serge Gainsbourg sort of vibe to it.
What is
Okay.
it? What is this album?
Background
This is...
music.
Are you talking about our album?
Yeah.
I was talking about
by
our...
the Transpersonals.
Yeah,
So you're influenced by us?
No,
Hey, Luke, were you
the
there at the
influences
recording
of the
session?
band.
Oh, Gainsbourg. Serge Gainsbourg.
Yeah, that's another. I mean, we
Influences
all
the
like...
band.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us a bit about Serge Gainsbourg. I've heard the name, don't know anything about the guy.
French guy.
Well, he's a French sort of composer, artist, sort of...
He's dead now, isn't he? But
Yeah, he died a long
Seducer
time
of
ago.
women.
but
Yeah,
he's massive.
Lover
in
of fine
France.
wines.
yeah. He's
Well, he
sort of-
was massive in France, and he did tunes with Brigitte Bardot, didn't he? There's a film about him. That's really
There is,
good.
actually, yeah.
So he's an influence. Tim, what about you?
1950s rock and roll. Chuck Berry, Little Richard. People like Lee Dorsey, which is more kind of like funk soul stuff. But I went through the Beatles were the first thing that switched me on. Listening, going through their stuff. The Beatles have got to be in there. That's like all brand.
Well, this
You've
is
got
the
to have
thing,
your
it's-
staple diet in there.
I was
But-
trying to not talk about 60s, but basically the Beatles is where it sort of
when I was a kid,
for me
there
as
was all
well,
this
you know.
hip hop was starting off, and I was really interested in the samples. So that got if you really
All the old soul tunes and that.
I love the
Yeah.
way that the old nutritious music is constantly reworked through new stuff all the time and rearranged. I'm a big fan of sampling and even mashups, because you take two completely different cultural icons, say I don't know, Bon Jovi and the Beatles. Not that they're that different, but you could take something. You could take hip hop and you could take pop, put it together, and create this third thing that transcends the two. And the language of music brings that together.
And
I
I quite
believe
like-
it to be the
I mean,
language of angels.
The whole sampling thing is quite good, isn't it? I mean, you get an iconic moment in a film, maybe an old black and white film or something. You feel somehow, I've got to capture that moment and stick it in the middle of a song. And it just, even though people may never have seen the film, it's still, there's some kind of images come in your mind with that
Yeah.
sample. So yeah, I'm totally with you.
But because of the internet today, you can find one thing that really switches you on, really really affects you on YouTube, and on the right hand side you can just spend all day clicking on the things that it's linked to by association.
And then when you put it in your album, they can find you almost immediately and
Yeah.
sue you.
Where's my money?
Anyway,
But music itself, let's not forget, music itself is to learn to play an instrument. Once you've done that, you can delve into the actual realm of music yourself and influence yourself in a feedback loop.
great.
That's the magic.
The theme
of
of this new album is, what's it called? Because we've got some tracks here, but I'm not sure of the name of the album.
You said.
It's called background music, as in background music. Music that's in the background.
In the lift or something?
Yeah, it evokes
In the
that
supermarket?
image. But really what it means is that this was an idea that came about listening to a scientist called, I don't know really how you pronounce his name, but he's very famous.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. And anyway, he was explaining that on a clip on YouTube that I was watching, that his favourite his favourite artist was Van Gogh, because he painted Starry Night, and the subject of that painting is the background. It's the sky, it's the universe, because there's a tree in there, and there's a couple of things in the foreground, but he called it Starry Night, or whatever it was he called it. So really he's pointing at the bigger picture, and that is exactly really what I try to do with all of my songs. I'm trying to point at the mystery of the universe.
Well, let's hear another one now. This one's Secret Garden.
Mm-hmm.
song's called Secret Garden. The band is Transpersonals, and they're with me here on Dialect. Tim, let's go straight back to talk about influences and themes. What about you talked about the idea of music as a drug. If music is a drug, now I take that it might be. What is the purpose of it? If you're listening to it, what's it going to do? Is it really going to transform, and how? If so,
well, the purpose of it for me is that it acts as a drug. I don't take drugs now. I have done in the past. It's the first drug. It's the first thing that ever changed reality to such an extent that I felt ecstatic, as a child. When those records that I was talking about, those 1950s rock and roll records, when my dad put those on the record player, everything changed. The room transformed from quite a dull suburban living room into a secret party in my brain, which is what was, just the lyrics in that track then. I would be up on my feet, dancing around. So taking that into account, because it is air molecules vibrating, and a drug is made of molecules, a couple of atoms stuck together. The purpose would be to create music that has the highest impact possible for losing oneself in, to create an environment of sound. And if you can add lyrics and poetry to that as well that are symbolic, and you keep adding to this mystery.
It's a sort of language music, isn't it? And it's one of those languages that anyone on you could play it to an Eskimo. An Eskimo is going to get the same. You
won't find musicians, right? When you are a musician and you get to know all the other musicians in your city and stuff like that, it is impossible, if you're a good musician, to be racist, homophobic, to have any of these type of prejudice, misogynistic, because everybody is involved, and you want to collaborate. You want to speak together, you want to come together, and you want to make music together.
That's all right,
and
for
it's
musicians.
Unifying.
It's all right for musicians to do that, but that's not the way the world works nowadays. The world works with big promoters, and it's a kind of formula. It's like a factory. What they'll do is they'll say, someone, you write good lyrics, someone else here, you play bass guitar good, and you go into the machine. Well, the machine starts churning, and out comes a song.
Yeah, well, they'll also put your icons in boxes as well, in order to put you in certain boxes. They got the 12 to 14-year-old market, which is anything from Lady Gaga to Beyonce to Justin Bieber to One Direction and all these other artists that nobody... Well, anyway, blah, blah, blah. But
I saw this going on.
You don't have to mix up what's going on the TV with music.
Well, I saw this sort of thing going on at the BBC, the similar sort of transformation when I was there in the early 90s, where originally the whole thing had been set up where people would sit around and say, well, we want to do this, and then they draw up a budget as to how they would pay for it. Slowly but surely, it all turned into, well, we've got this amount of money and we're going to give you that amount, and you've got to do it all with the money. So it became a decision based on budgets rather than creativity and ideas. And the nice thing about the old days was, you just basically found the budget to do it from one place or another. And if you didn't have the budget, well, you just had to wait a few months till the next budget round, until the budget came round. And this is, I think, is a big problem nowadays, is that there isn't finished films, for example, on TV, just do not exist. You cannot go to a broadcaster and say, right, we've just made a film, will you show it? Because they won't. What you can say is, we've got an idea to make a film. And I'm twisting the point here from the music to the film a bit, okay. But what they'll say is, well, yes, we like that idea. Actually, thank you very much. You can be involved still, but we're going to have this person presenting it, this person producing it, and it's going to look like that. Yeah. So it's no longer your idea. It's become a kind of postmodern transformation of what your idea might have been into what someone else has decided it should have been.
Yeah.
Well, we've
come across that sort of thing with our music, haven't we? Like, when
we go into a studio, we've got our own space that we can record in. All this.
We're in a really fortunate position, actually, because we can do everything in house,
and that's not come through. That's not come through money.
You have to have any space.
That's come through making music, right? So I still have a day job. We all do. I'm gardening every day. Now I'd rather be in the secret gardening every day, with the freedom to record music with my fellow musicians, than try to pander to the greasy totem pole of trying once again to get on the telly and to get on. We've had Single of the Week on Radio 2. We're on a Mojo Award-winning compilation album. So there's two examples there where we've dipped our toes into that world, but you can become very very distracted very quickly by becoming obsessed with trying to get further and further into the mainstream and completely lose the magic that you've already got, which is developing your own personal adventure through sound with your friends that you're sharing with an audience that find you because they're looking for it. I want people that are seeking us to find us. I don't want to try and go out there and advertise myself to everyone. People consistently mistake success for fame and money. And the logo of our band is, we don't have a lot of fame or money, but we sure have a lot of success. You know?
Also, Bristol as a place to work. Maybe you, Matty, or Luke. You know, what do you think of it as a? Is it a good place to be collaborating, maybe with other bands, to socialise with other musicians? And
It's a good place for being creative in.
Yeah, I mean,
There's a lot of inspiration, like from other people and that, and like you want to do like decent stuff because everyone else is like really good as well. But there's like it can sort of.
Well, Matt's not just in the Transpersonals. Matt plays the drums with Neville Staple as well.
I
Matt?
do.
So
Yeah,
he gets out there a bit.
I wanted to say I'm not actually from Bristol originally. I'm from Swindon, which is not far away. But the reason I came here was because of the musicians and the people and the creativity and the things that were happening in Bristol that kind of like I wanted to get involved with. So
but is that just a myth, or did you really feel?
No,
like,
It's not a myth.
It's not a myth at all. It's a really. I mean, obviously, you probably don't see it if you're from here, but as an outsider coming into that world, it very much exists. That kind of like that. You can do whatever, any musical, whatever you're interested in, you can do.
And don't forget, there's a big community in Bristol, like where I live in St Paul's, and there's a real thriving culture there.
Maybe you could just let us know how to get hold of the new album, Background Music.
Send me a tweet, Matty Bane, and I'll send you a free copy.
Or find us on MySpace.
Hang on,
MySpace, remember that?
Are you actually giving it away?
Yeah,
giving the album away?
It is going to go out on. We put our stuff out now through something called AWAL, which any musicians out there should know about that want to put out their stuff.
Artists Without a Label.
Yeah, a friend of ours that contacted us, a fan of us, works for this company called AWAL, and you can put your stuff out there. You don't need a label, and it's a fantastic
They
idea.
put it on like Spotify and iTunes. And
Yeah,
all that for
it
you.
gets out there.
So it will be good.
Amazon. You can download it and all.
Oh,
that.
that's good. So you're going to one place that will then sort of all the main commercial places. They'll put it on there, but then they'll also
and they don't rip
do
you
it
off.
themselves.
And if you're not really if you just want to get your music out there, it's great. Nobody,
Yeah.
and so it will be on iTunes and it will be on all that stuff. Early
no
next
doubt
year,
Amazon
next
will be
year.
making AWAL an offer.
They can, yeah.
Yes. Hey guys, we like this idea. Can we?
But anybody can have any of our
spare
stuff.
million.
They take a big cut, though, don't they? iTunes
Yeah,
and all that.
yeah. I mean,
But they don't want this sort of thing being given away. It seems there's quite a lot of people. They want the big boys actually do want to see the music industry controlled a bit
Yeah.
more.
Well, this is. See, we have emails from people who say to us, from different countries, different cities around the world, that are almost like cult members that want the files to then distribute personally to their friends, and then they pass it on, and they pass it on, and everybody's.
Yeah,
I'd rather
we've done
that was
that.
going on
Yeah.
than trying to. Really trying to get somewhere on that frame, on that TV screen.
But it's good. I mean, if it's available in the normal places like Amazon,
yeah, it'd be
iTunes,
like
things like that,
normal
people can
places
pay for it.
and
You're not going to
Absolutely,
complain,
yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, lovely to have you in, guys. You are the Transpersonals, Tim Hurford, Luke Barter, Matty Bane, and we're going to finish with a song called "There You Go."
Okay, well, this last song is really more about the music, because it's got a large psychedelic delayed guitar break in the middle, which is homage to some of those psychedelic bands we were talking about. And people can see us live, mainly in Bristol. We like to play in
We've got
Bristol.
a gig on December 3rd at Mother's Ruin.
supporting
Next
with a
gig.
great band called
Altered Hours.
Altered Hours.
not
Check them
altered
out,
images,
though.
altered hours.
Altered
Yeah.
Hours.
So where is that?
Mother's Ruin, that's in town,
Bristol.
Isn't it? That's like, by St
Yeah, what's the name of the road?
Nicholas Market.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Lovely. Well, let's see now.
Mother's Ruin, yeah.
December 3rd.
Yeah.
There you go.
And that was There You Go by the Transpersonals. You can find them Transpersonals YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/user/transpersonals, or you can follow Matty, that is at Matty Bane, MATTYBANE, on Twitter. That's Matty Bane on Twitter.
Bristol Community FM 93.2. Your voice, your choice.
And in a similar theme, we're now going to rejoin an interview which we've been doing over the last couple of months, which is Aldous Huxley. Now, Aldous Huxley is an author. In the 1930s, he wrote a book called Brave New World, which is rather similar to George Orwell's 1984, a dystopia novel. We're going to go to his talk that he did in 1962 now at Berkeley, California, at the university over there. And the talk was called The Ultimate Revolution, about the scientific dictatorship which he saw looming in the future, called by many the technocracy. No democracy, just the people who control the technology controlling us and the controlling oligarchy. And he starts this week by talking about hypnosis.
One of the things we now know for certain is that there is, of course, an enormous, this has been always known, a very great difference between individuals in regard to their suggestibility. But we now, I think, know pretty clearly the sort of statistical structure of a population in regard to its suggestibility. It's very interesting when you look at the findings in different fields. In the field of hypnosis, in the field of administering placebos, for example, in the field of general suggestion in states of drowsiness or of light sleep, you will find the same sorts of orders of magnitude continually cropping up. You will find, for example, that the experienced hypnotists will tell one that the number of people, the percentage of people who can be hypnotized with the utmost facility, just like that, is about 20%. That about a corresponding number at the other end of the scale are very, very difficult or almost impossible to hypnotize, and that in between there lies a large mass of people who can, with more or less difficulty, be hypnotized, that they can gradually be, if you work hard enough at it, be got into the hypnotic state. And in the same way, the same sort of figures crop up again, for example, in relation to the administration of placebos. A big experiment was carried out 3 or 4 years ago in the General Hospital in Boston on post-operative cases where several hundred men and women suffering comparable kinds of pain after serious operations were given injections whenever they asked for them, whenever the pain got bad, and the injections 50% of the time were of morphia and 50% of the time were of distilled water. And about 20% of those who went through the experiment, about 20% of them got just as much relief from the distilled water as from the morphia. About 20% got no relief from the distilled water, and in between were those who got some relief or got relief occasionally. So here again we see the same sort of distribution. And similarly with regard to what in Brave New World I call hypnopedia, which is the sleep teaching, I was talking not long ago to a man who manufactures records which people can listen to during the light part of sleep. These are records for getting rich, for sexual satisfaction, for confidence in salesmanship, and so on. And he said it's very interesting that these records are sold on a money-back basis, and he says that there is regularly between 15 and 20% of people who write indignantly saying the records don't work at all, and he sends the money back at once. On the other hand, there are some, over 20% who write enthusiastically, saying they're now much richer, their sexual life is much better, etc., etc. And these, of course, are the dream clients, and they buy more of these records. And then in between are those who complain they're not getting much results, and they have to have letters written to them saying, well, go persist, my dear, go on, and you'll get there. And they generally do get results in the long run. Well, as I say, this on the basis of this, I think we see quite clearly that the human populations can be categorized according to their suggestibility fairly clearly. I suspect very strongly that this 20% is the same in all these cases. And I suspect also that it would not be at all difficult to recognize in very early childhood who were those who were extremely suggestible, who were those who were extremely unsuggestible, and who were those who occupied the intermediate space. Quite clearly, if everybody were extremely unsuggestible, organized society would be quite impossible.
That was Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World and The Doors of Perception and other books. He died in 1963, and that talk was given in Berkeley, California, 1962, just a year before he died. The talk entitled The Ultimate Revolution, and we'll have more of that in future weeks.
You're listening to dialectradio.co.uk.